Hello and welcome to another SimHERA tutorial. In this tutorial, we will be walking through mini assignment number 2 to get learners familiar with setting stimuli for ABR testing and the differences in simulated cochlear activation patterns between 5-cycle tones and narrowband chirp stimuli. If you'd like to follow along, you will find the link to the mini assignment number 2 PDF in the description below. Let's get started. Okay, the first thing we're going to do is follow the mini assignment procedures, and that is to create a case. We are going to create a new case, go to simulate case. We're going to do case review on so we can see what's going on. We'll hit typical and we'll see the audiogram over on the right change. So we've set a new case now. And then the next thing we're going to do is set up the patient. So we go to patient setup. And we're going to do a little cheat here. We're not going to apply the electrodes. We are going to auto-apply them. There is the mini assignment 1 and other videos that show you how to apply the electrodes and insert the earphones. So the patient's set up here. We're on to now visualizing the cochlear activations to the various different types of stimuli that we're going to look at today. To do that, we're going to go to the evoked response tab here. And then we are going to click on View Coch. That will come up with a little ding that you probably heard there because we haven't actually set the stimulus yet, and we do not see the cochlear activation patterns. The next thing to do is to change either one of the stimulus parameters. Here I'm just going to change frequency, and then you'll see that everything gets updated here. So now we have activation patterns for the right cochlea, which is shown on the left graph, and the left cochlear activation shown on the right. What we're going to do now, we see that there is this green mountain-like thing. That's the cochlear activation. The blue lines here are the actual stimulus that would be going into the cochlea, delivered through the insert earphones. And the shaded area is the threshold for the left ear for that type of stimulus. We're using an air-conducted transducer, so that's the air-conducted thresholds. So this cochlear activation pattern is for a 2-1-2 or a 5-cycle tone. We can change that to a narrowband level-dependent chirp by clicking on that, and you'll see that it updates the activation pattern here. Also, it gives a dB SL adjusted level, which I won't talk about here, but it gives the bandwidth at 10 dB down and the Q10 dB, which is a measure of its sharpness. Those are the two things that we're going to be looking at in this mini assignment. So let's just flip back to that 2-1-2 tone and observe what we're seeing with the cochlear activation. There's the 2-1-2 tone, and there's the narrowband chirp stimulus. So I'd want you to observe that, click back and forth, and see what you think is different between those two different stimuli. And in the mini assignment, you can add your comments into question 1. It's to compare and contrast your visual impressions of the cochlear activation patterns between the 2-1-2 tone and the narrowband level-dependent chirp stimuli. Be brief, 1 to 3 sentences describing the width, maybe how broad it is, how narrow it is, the shape of it, is it flat, is it rounded, is it peaky, or whatever else you feel is relevant in the differences between those cochlear activation patterns. So once you've done that, what we're going to do is move on and look at this in a more objective manner and using the metrics of the BW 10 dB or bandwidth and the Q10 dB and putting them into that table that's in the mini assignment. So I'm going to do the first stimulus type being 2-1-2 and a 500 Hertz tone. And there we have that cochlear activation pattern with a bandwidth of 291 Hertz. So we put that into that first cell in that table in the mini assignment number 2. And then the Q10 dB is 1.76. We can then change that to the chirp and enter those numbers. Now that's 523 Hertz and a Q10 dB of 1.09. That 1.09 is lower than the 1.76 that we had for the 2-1-2 tone, so it's saying it's not as sharp. And you saw that the bandwidth also is broader for the chirp stimuli. Okay. So we're going to do that now for the 2000 hertz stimulus. So I'm going to go just quickly back to the 212 tone, and we're just going to move this over to 2000 hertz and note those numbers. Now it's 1232 hertz and a Q10 dB of 1.61. And we can move that now to the NB chirp, and you can see how we're now having a broader bandwidth and a lower Q10 dB. And then we're going to calculate in the table the differences between the bandwidths of the 212 and the level-dependent chirps. And that will help you answer questions number 2 and number 3. So question 2 is, from the table, briefly summarize the objective measures of the bandwidth at 10 dB down and the Q10 dB and their differences with respect to the 212 tone and the narrowband level-dependent chirps. And then answer the question number 3, what would you conclude about the cochlear frequency specificity between these two types of stimuli based on your subjective impressions, the answer to number 1, and your objective measures, the answers that you provided in question 2. And that completes your mini assignment. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial and you learned how to change some stimuli and you learned about cochlear activation patterns and how the different stimuli will affect the cochlear activations. Take care and have fun learning.